Hello Grebos and welcome back to Downloadable Content. I have a super exciting video for us today. Joining me is the Baron himself. Say hi, Baron.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
So I thought this would be kind of exciting to do a follow-up to the preview for U11. I know everyone has a ton of questions and they want to know what's possible and they also want things spoiled. But to be direct with everyone, we're going to go over what's possible and we're going to avoid any type of spoilers or pitfalls because we don't want to blow up Baron's spot and we don't want to ruin the update for everyone. So what this video is going to be about, we're going to go over some questions that we as a community have about things like stealth, magic, mods, and possibly what is to come. So I'm super excited. So without further ado, let's dive in and kick things off. So Baron, I think the surprise that everyone is excited for is not just U11 in and of itself. That kind of came just out of nowhere with your announcement, which was super exciting. But I think the big surprise is stealth. You know, U10 kind of brought stealth to the forefront. And even in your post, it looks like you were excited to see how many players' play style kind of gravitated towards stealth.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and it's the classic blade and sorcery thing, you know, where it's like something that wasn't really thought of as being a big thing, and the players kind of latch onto it, and it's like, well, maybe maybe we'll pad this out a little bit. There might be something here. It was just one of those things. The stealth of U10. You know, it felt like it should be a thing, but of course we just didn't believe we had the resources to pad it out. But then based on kind of how players were playing it and enjoying it, which is the crazy thing, because I mean it's so rudimentary, but U10 players are still like, oh, this is fun. So I was hyped. I was biting my lip because I knew these things were planned, but I couldn't get too much into it. I wanted to make sure they were, you know, done or nearly done before I kind of like talked about them in the news, because you know the whole thing, you don't really like to make promises just in case they don't come true, you know. So we want to be sure.
Yeah.
So you know, I was just crawling through Reddit posts, you know, secretly taking notes and stuff, and kind of like based on what players were into and what they were saying would be cool. So what we have coming down the line is the improvements for the big ones being the AI being a little bit more responsive now. So it's still, you know, it'll never be Thief VR, you know what I mean, like that kind of thing. But they're a little bit more responsive, so they react to being like touched, or if you're dangling like bodies or weapons in front of their face, you know, they react to that now. They react to sound better, not just footsteps, but they react to like if they hear other people shouting. The light is now a factor. Although I haven't tested this myself, so I just want to say a little like disclaimer. I'm not 100% positive how that works, so I need to see it in game.
I want to expand upon the finding the dead body. So, you know, in a game, you know, something that comes to mind would be Hitman, right? Of course, Hitman came out with a VR component, but so in this one, they find a dead body. Are they alerted on an alert state? Can they do they automatically know where the player is also if they find a dead body?
That's a great question that I don't know the answer to.
Excellent.
It's a great question. Like I don't know if they alert and then you know, are patrolling, or like are they alert and beeline straight from the player? I'll find the answer to that question. Excellent. And I'll let you know.
And hopefully we have an answer for this next question. So, and this is still on stealth. So you mentioned sound, you mentioned line of sight and everything. The big thing about stealth, maybe i.e. Assassin's Creed, is breaking line of sight. So let's say I'm spotted. I just took someone out and I want to get out of there. Maybe I have low health, or maybe I'm doing a weird playthrough. Can I go back into a state of stealth? Like, will the enemy give up looking for me? And maybe what happens after I break line of sight?
God, this is also a great question. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to type. I'm going to ask the question to the guy who's working on this. I'm going to ask these questions right now and get an answer.
Now, I also see in one of these amazing GIFs that a player is holding the mouth of an NPC. Now, I do have questions, and a bunch of the community has questions as well, but I kind of want to see where the team's head is and where that kind of came about.
It came about. We just thought it was cool. Someone had made a comment about it on Reddit. You know, it would be cool if you could put your hand over the mouth and like stealth kill him, and I was just like, yeah, that is cool. You're right. Let's add that. So it's oftentimes as simple as that. It's I'm always reading. I read everything, on Reddit, and so it's a really good place to kind of get in your suggestions. And yeah, if it's cool and if it makes sense, yeah, we should just do it.
I think that's actually one of the biggest, one of the coolest parts about Blade and Sorcery, is the game, but the community and how the community helps shape the game as well. And it feels like you and your team are, like you said, very open, and you see the suggestions, and the ones that are feasible and possible seem to make it into the game. So another thing I have before we move on, and still in the realm of stealth and what we're working on, is I also want to incorporate mod support and maybe not go off to the rails. So I see here that the man he's being muffled, right? So does that open up any possibility for modders now that there is a new grabbable point on that one? Can they maybe suffocate them from this angle? What's possible now?
100%, yeah. Because in fact, if I recall correctly, there used to be a suffocate mod, but I think it was on the neck. I think it was a choke the person mod. So I could totally imagine a suffocate mod. Yeah, totally. I'm not sure what else they could do with it, but you never know with modders. They come up with the craziest stuff, So this stealth situation, to answer those questions, I have not played myself, so I can't say with such accuracy how this feels. But what I've been told about it was that with NPCs who find bodies, they go on permanent full alert, but that's it. They don't actually hunt the player down. They don't do anything like that. They're just on permanent alert. And the dude at Warfrog was saying he was thinking about making them maybe wander randomly, because they're kind of hunting for the killer and stuff like that. That could be awesome. That could be really cool, because then they're actively seeking you. However, that is not coded into the game yet, so that would be something we would add maybe later. And then when you were asking about will they go from alert state back into a non-alert, that is a feature. That is the case, yeah.
That's cool.
The only exception being if they find a dead body.
Oh, okay.
But if they hear noise or something like that, and they become alerted, if you're away long enough or hiding long enough, they'll go back into non-alert.
It would be interesting to see, though, with a non-alert state, if I came behind them and gave them a non-fatal stab and then ran away and broke line of sight. Now are they permanently alerted?
Yeah.
Or they're just damn, that guy stabbed me. I wonder, that was weird.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't know, actually, because you could do that in theory. You could climb, and then they wouldn't be able to climb after you. So, that's a great question. I really can't wait to get my hands on it myself, because then I can test all these things out.
All right, so the next piece of this one is magic, and there's not so much to cover in this one, so I don't want to pull out any unnecessary information from you, especially since you said this is a work in progress. So the magic for the U11 update, correct me if I'm wrong, is because it's a heavy work in progress, the update that players will probably get is more about adding missing VFX and possibly adding things like merging to fire to lightning and give it more staff abilities, right?
So this is so definitely in U11 for PC anyway is some new VFX and stuff. That's definitely the case. But why I'm apprehensive about saying what else will be in U11 is because I literally don't know. So we have someone working on this, and he is doing a crazy good job. But it's a ton of work, and kind of he's doing a broad spread of everything. So he's got a little bit done on everything, but nothing is polished or final. So that's why I'm apprehensive to say maybe some little stuff will be in U11, maybe nothing will be in U11, and it'll be all saved for U12. But anyway, regardless of what will or will not be in U11, what he's working on is basically we're padding out all the spells. So they're a little bit more like gravity, and then beyond gravity, actually. So just like the way with gravity, you have a one-handed stun. You can do two single hands, and it's a big kind of force push. You can merge gravity. You can imbue a staff of gravity, and then that can slam. All this different kind of stuff. Whereas with fireball or lightning, it's just it's just a fireball. Or it's just a lightning. So the idea would be that if you had a lightning staff, you could do a utility with that staff, that there could be like two-handed effects for spells, that there could be merges for spells. Eventually, this is something we have not started on, but eventually there was an idea that we could do like cross elemental merges.
Oh wow.
Like fire plus gravity equals something. You know what I mean? So there's a huge amount of stuff coming, and there's some crazy ideas being thrown around on our Warfrog Discord. So I think people are going to be really surprised, I think, when they see how padded out the current spells become.
And looking at the GIF that you put in here, the character seems to be levitating across a gap. And is that definitely making it into U? I know I said to avoid the definites in U11, but it seems like you guys made a GIF of it, and so it's almost like 90% working. So
it's working all right. It looks good for U11. That's what I would say. I would never give it a definite for anything, because you know how these things are. But yeah, it's working. It's looking good. So I think that'll be in U11.
One of the spells you guys are also working on, you mentioned, is Soul. And you also said it's unlikely to arrive until U12 and possibly even the full release of game, right?
Yeah.
So why talk about it if the player might not get access to it? Or are you guys being the secret warp frog like what you did with Nomad, and then you're going to secretly release it?
No, it's so the only reason I mention it is because I didn't want to say all the spells are done. There definitely will be a soul spell, and I think enough players know that, because people still message me saying, "Hey, when is soul coming? When is soul coming?" But as far as I know, it wasn't planned until progression mode, because Cosby had explained that it would somehow tie into the like kind of progression element of the game. However, here's the thing. There's no solid plan what that spell is. So actually there's no big secret there. It's not set in stone. There were some really cool ideas being thrown around the Discord about what it could be. And Cosby had kind of an idea what he thinks it's going to be, but nothing is set in stone. So that's why I wouldn't really say
that's
anything.
Exciting.
It's just not fully decided.
Well, especially for a progression system, if I can throw in some random nonsense here. Nonsense. I imagine casting the soul spell on a person, i.e. Skyrim, with like the soul stone, and if they die, maybe you get more experience. You're capturing them, and I don't know how you guys are handling the XP. That's going to be later down in the video, but that'd be interesting to see, because I imagine that all these spells have multiple utilities, so that is interesting.
Yeah.
So and just to maybe pull this out of you, can we expect any type of soul magic in U11 for that a player can use?
For that, I can say definitely no, because it's not only not being worked on, but like I said, we just don't even have an idea of what the spell is. Yeah, exactly. But by the way, just a little tangent. You're saying about XP, so there's actually not really going to be any XP in a traditional sense for progression mode. There'll be like a skill tree, and that'll be what is essentially the progression, and it would be done through crystals.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you're bringing this up. I was gonna parcel it in somewhere, but I think it's a great spot to talk about then. Would be a skill system and exactly setting that in proper perspective for players, right? Because Crystal Hunt, correct me if I'm wrong, is one of the next updates, right? That would be likely U12. Okay, so
that would likely be what U12 will be, yeah. And it's called Crystal Hunt, but you might have informally heard of it being referred to as progression mode, or sometimes people say campaign mode. But I kind of don't like saying campaign mode, because a lot of times people think that means there's some kind of like storyline going with it, and that's not true.
Where's my interactive cinemas, man? I need to be able to. I think they were about the progression mode and Crystal Hunt mode, and you mentioned skills. If I could ask a question maybe it's in the form of a not question, and some of my hopes and maybe some of my fears. So when I think skills. And I think VR, I those two words to me don't collide. I play some other games, and we're not going to name other games, that also have skills in VR, and it's kind of physics based. And I've seen other modders for Blade and Sorcery make gesture-based stuff and whatever. So I'm just afraid that a skill you guys might have might be like fireball slash, and I have to do some weird like jutsu in my room, and because it's tracking and a lot of players have quest 2s and stuff, like it's just not gonna translate. So I'm hoping those aren't the skills, and I'm hoping the skills you guys do come up with would be like your character is now gains X amount of strength where they can penetrate leather armor with a long sword with a stab, and they're more renowned in claymore fighting. So if they decide to go in slow motion and swing a claymore, they may lose that super weighted feel. So where's the mindset going into skills?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I can't say with 100% authority because it's literally not done. So I can't say for positive, but where I can tell you where our head is at is that the one thing we're seeking to avoid is, like everything in Blade and Sorcery, seeking to avoid anything that's too gamey. So generally anything that crunches numbers, we avoid it. You know what I mean? So like it's really a classic thing in like RPGs and stuff where you get a level up, in your strength, and that's like, you're 5% more damage, and then you level up again, it's like now you're 10% more damage. It's like, man, I actually personally I hate that. I really can't stand it. It's so boring to me. But if you go back to one of the big inspirations for Blade and Sorcery, Dark Messiah, that has a great example of a skill tree where the idea is each new unlock on the skill tree is kind of like a new utility, I guess you could say, like it's going to add something to how you play the game. So here's a complete guess. No, as I say, we haven't decided this, so it's not set in stone. But here's a guess example. I would say an example of a skill would be like, say, on a magic tree, let's say, you would unlock the gravity hover. That would be, to me, like an example of what it would be. So you have like your normal gravity spell, and then as you progress through the game, you decide, oh, okay, I want to be a mage. You're going to go down the magic skill tree, and one of the unlocks for the magic is the like the little GIF, the gravity hover. That would be an example.
Okay, I think that makes sense. You like you said, you unlock gravity, then you unlock merge, you unlock gravity hover.
Exactly.
Maybe longer telekinesis grab from further away, stuff like that.
Could be, yeah, exactly.
But
stuff like that.
I do want to not get you, but I think the easy route for skills to speculate on is magic. We could say, yeah, you can do this more with magic, but what is the challenge of speculation with melee combat? Because like you said, you just want to, if I stab someone in the jugular and I'm not using a mod, they're going down. If I get them with a dagger and there's no armor.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm fighting a knight and they're fully decked out in plate and they got new animations, and I get in on their guard and I'm slashing them. What does a skill could look like for the melee system?
A great question. I don't fully know. I really don't. Maybe it would be, I could be wrong, but I kind of can't foresee it being anything that changes like the physics. So like you were saying about, will I be able to swing a sword faster? I kind of don't really see that being the case. Just because I think it would be kind of counter to the whole philosophy in the first place, which is if there was a better way to swing the sword, then it would just be in the base game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like we wouldn't want to make it so the sword fighting is like crap for players until they unlock a skill. You know what I mean? Like, so, but it's hard to say for that. Maybe, and this is complete speculation. I don't know. Maybe it could be something to do with armor. It could be like maybe you have to get to a stage where you can wear heavy armor. Maybe. Maybe it could be something like. Actually, I was just talking on Reddit about this. We were saying that what would be the difference between wearing light armor and heavy armor. And right now we haven't decided, but one theory that was floated was maybe we could have it that if you're wearing like clothing, like a mage clothing, maybe it could be you're faster, you're more agile, kind of like how Sandbox is right now.
Yeah.
And maybe even you have a little mana buff.
Oh yeah.
Or and especially if you have a staff in your hand, maybe that could count towards mana too.
That's a good
and then
idea. They're wearing mage
and then
robes, they get a boost of mana.
yeah. And then the flip side of that would be if you're full plate, like metal helmet, metal plate, all that kind of stuff. Maybe you'd be slower. This was just an idea. Maybe magic doesn't work. That could be a thing.
Oh.
And then one idea that was floated was maybe you have trouble climbing, or maybe can't even climb if you're in like a full plate of armor. So that would be the extreme other side of the coin, like going from a full mage build to a full warrior build.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Or then, you can have leather, and then you're somewhere in between both. So anyway, to get back to the point, maybe a skill could be something like, well, now you can climb with full plate or something like that. I'm honestly not sure,
So let's say this game is in full release. Boom.
Yeah.
Smash cut to 2083. Boom. Game is in full release. Will there still be a sandbox mode for people to kind of play around with and do stuff if the game is already out? Because I know sandbox sometimes is used to test things, but...
Oh, no, definitely. Yeah, 100% I can confirm. Sandbox mode will always be there. And I can also confirm 100% that everything will always be unlocked in sandbox mode. Every spell, every item, every map location, the dev options, cheats will always be there in sandbox mode. Yeah.
So the next big topic is the apparel system. And this is going to bleed into character customization in just a little bit. But I think the way you guys are going about the apparel is cool. I think just from the GIF alone, even the clothes folded up, they have simulated weight. And I think that's just a great touch of that one. So I do have a couple of questions for myself and some community questions about this one. So I think we'll go with its simplest form. You say right here, wearing the armor is very simple. Just place it on your body. So let's say I put on a leather gauntlet. Can I then take a plate gauntlet and put it over it and instantly replace it?
Good question. Don't have the answer.
Okay.
That's a great question. Like, for example, do you need to take it off first and put it on? So the apparel system is like really kind of cutting edge on the development. So it's the two things that I showed you in the news. They were recorded like literally, I think it was like the night before. So that's how cutting edge this is. Like the guy who's working on it is literally just working on this now. So I would think that maybe the best way of doing it would be maybe take off the glove and then put on a new one. I don't know. What would you think? Would you prefer you have to take it off, or would you prefer you could just put it kind of like overwrite it and just put a new glove on?
I think it depends on how you guys put the logic of taking it off, because everything is physics based. So if you guys stick with having full physics like self collision, if I'm already touching my body, how do am I going to accidentally press the grip and take it off? Like, what does that feel like?
Yeah, exactly.
So
like your clothes come flying off in the middle of combat by accident. I imagine it's probably unlikely to happen by accident though, because there's no, I don't know the answer, but I would imagine it's probably going to be some kind of like button config, like kind of like the quiver, where it's like trigger plus grip, something that you're not likely to accidentally press.
So like you said, even though this is breaking news, I'm still going to ask two more questions if I could about apparel. I know you say you might get the answers or not know, and that's okay. So going back to the original GIF of the simulated weighted clothes, if possible that I can bring clothes with me, are those those physics in the best way I can wear this, will they have damagers? Can I throw this at someone and hurt them with the folded up leather clothes?
I'm nearly sure you cannot hurt, because I don't think they're not they don't have like weapon stats in that kind of way, So
the next question about apparel, can you this is weird, can you remove clothes from the NPCs after they have fallen in combat? Can I take their helmet and equip it? Can I take their... That would be cool to see. I know you alluded to not having this answer already, so I don't want to pick you down for this, but it would be cool to be like, taking your plate boot, taking your helmet. That
would be cool. That really would be cool. I'll try and find that answer for you, and I can let you know on Discord or Reddit, and then you could let your followers know. I don't know because there is no answer. So
Cool.
that's a good question. I kind of the more we're talking out loud about this, the more I'm starting to think that maybe the plan was to have it disabled like in maps, and restricted to the shop and home areas maybe, because that kind of makes sense because the mirror's there and
The next part about this one is character customization. I know to put a caveat is you guys mentioned in the post, it's not going to be in the same vein of U7.
yeah,
For those out there that have not played in the U7 update or even, you can create weird things, long
yeah,
arms, short, think like an Ark survival character in VR.
yeah.
And I think that posed some weird physics, right? That kind of created some issues.
Yeah, I don't know the precise technical details, but it was to do it when the character system was redone, back in 8.4, which eventually became Update 9. Um, yeah, there was it was basically like a trade off. It was kind of like if we could remove those things, it would help us, in XYZ. And I don't know, I can't remember those fine details. But yeah, there was some technical limitation why we couldn't reintroduce all that kind of like fine customization.
Yeah,
And
and I'm pretty satisfied with that. I'm sure people will want more, or eventually things can be done, right? Like you said, manpower and ability to do it.
yeah, like it's moving now. You should see it. The,
Yeah,
the same the same guy who did the bones and the clothes is actually working on it. He's one of our modelers, and he's great.
that's
And
awesome.
yeah, he's working really at speed now. So we actually have like a lot more done than I just posted on Steam. But the one I posted on Steam was the best, the most finished one he has done.
That's awesome.
Um,
And like you said, seeing the diversity of skin tones and what the character can and will look like is very important. I said it in the
yeah.
preview that you're playing essentially as yourself because you're playing in VR.
Hmm.
And we're not getting into the lore just yet or anything, but because it's so lore light and the game it tells itself while you play it, is you want to feel immersed into it. So if you're,
Hmm.
you know, you want to look how you want to look, and I think that's important. And I do have a question about that. It would be cool. Yeah, that's not even a question, but it would be cool if you can customize like scars in the game too. That might be kind of cool.
Yeah, so we're on that, and that's something that is on the to-do list, but it just hasn't started yet. And we were thinking the exact same thing: scars and tattoos.
Cool.
And so we're in the design phase of that, but it hasn't actually been implemented into the game.
So not coming to U11 is what I'm hearing.
I don't think so because I could be wrong, but it would require that all the work that we're working on now gets done really quickly, and then someone is free in time to do it. So kind of don't think it'll be U11, but on the radar, yeah, that is a cool idea. Scars and tattoos and stuff.
Now the next part is you said in the post an inventory system, and you did mention that there's nothing to preview, unfortunately. So there is one thing I want to touch base on this one. I'm not going to bring any questions from that one to you just because you said there's nothing to preview, so there's no point in asking questions of that one. But you did mention the ability to collect things like props and use later because you want to see on Reddit, you want to see prop shenanigans, which is amazing. Currently in U10, things like the wagon wheel and certain things, they do have physics, but they don't have proper like handles, right? So if I want to grab one of the wheels of the wagon wheel, I kind of can't. I have to do that weird blade and sorcery grab, where the guy has like a claw hand. So
Yeah,
is that
yeah.
stuff being updated so that I can essentially loot all the physical items that I can interact with in the dungeon for U11?
As far as I understand, it's only going to be small items. So I don't think you could loot like a big wagon wheel or anything. I think the idea is more like, in terms of clutter, you'd be talking, the stuff like the books or the cutlery, those kind of small items that clutter shelves. Not so much like the wagon wheel or the wagon itself or barrels, not really like that. And and the point of it, the whole point we're having this is, it's the application for like loot. as in loot, not just like clutter, but like golds or that kind of stuff that you could use to buy stuff in the shop. From what I saw, where we left off, this was just a couple of days before I posted the news. Where it left off was the person who's worked on this had basically designed like, it was kind of like a radial wheel, I guess you could say, at the moment, and literally you just put clutter into it, and then it'll appear on that radial, and then you could just grab it from the radial. Now, the reason I couldn't preview that is because I'm not 100% sure if we're going to stick with that design.
I have to ask this question, otherwise I'll be lambasted if I don't, because we're mentioning loot and clutter. So no judgment here. So I'm fighting an enemy and I steal the fork. But now after I've stolen the fork, we get into combat and I end up chopping, let's say, his hand off. Are the hands now lootable and other body parts?
Great question. It's one of those things we'll have to see. I don't know.
So we'll leave it. We can leave it at that one.
Very good question.
I just wanted to put that out there.
That is exactly the kind of shenanigans that I wouldn't have thought about, but I expect to see on Reddit. That's exactly the kind of weird stuff players will do. That no one has thought of that they end up doing. So that's a great question.
Absolutely, which kind of leads into a weird next part, because now we're going to cover some dungeon stuff and we have doors opening. So I'm just imagining someone, a modder, making a fridge and they're like, look at all these body parts, and like, oh no, oh no.
Oh God,
FBI,
I didn't
open up. Dungeon stuff. Let's talk about some dungeon stuff.
Right.
So you mentioned all the way until 1.0, as I'm going to assume is the full release, no longer early access. Okay. So up until the full release of the game, it's going to continue to be worked on. And I think the biggest thing that you said, there's a lot of visual improvements that are being made, but also new tile sets, right? And you're refining the hitboxes. So the tile sets in a mode that's procedurally generated. Now, I've played a ton of dungeons, almost all the seeds imaginable. So I feel like I've seen all the tile sets. So with U11, I guess if you could put a speculatory number on it, how many new tile sets are we going to get here?
I don't know. It's there's a couple of rooms being worked on, but I need to go back and check. But you know, by full release, we were hoping on double the amount of rooms. Definitely that's not the case for U11, I can tell you, because just because flat out I can tell you not that many rooms have been worked on to amount to double. So a couple, but I'm not sure. I would need to go back and kind of double check.
Okay, and the couple that are being worked on, aside from the door, which we'll cover in just a moment, are there going to be any other, like, for lack of a better term, traps that the player can either succumb or that they can...
Yeah, so this is something we're kind of split on, and I think the answer is that no, there won't be traps in Blade and Sorcery Dungeons, and I'm in the school of thought that I would actually like traps. I think they would be good, but I know that the concerns for them are that it would be too repetitive. And I see where that argument is coming from. So, like, I was thinking, like, how cool would it be if you walked into a room and then suddenly the portcullis comes crashing down and the ceiling starts to crush, starts to, like, lower down, like Resident Evil. And, you got to figure out a way to, like, get the portcullis up, either by using strength or maybe just, like, a lever hidden somewhere or something like that. I thought that would be cool, but the argument against it is, it would be cool the first time. And then the second time, not so cool. And then by the third time you see it, it would be boring.
Well, what makes me think is, traps don't, like you said, it doesn't have to be a grandiose thing, right? It doesn't have to be, like you said, where the ceiling comes down each time. But I imagine, I'm looking at this door right now, and a door could be booby trapped or something. So let's say it's locked and I force it open with a knife. That forcing it open, something else can happen. Or I walk into a room and there's a plate switch, and I step on the plate switch and an arrow can shoot from the wall, which makes me think the player can turn around and grab that arrow. So these small things. And even in U10, I remember watching your preview of the video you made, and seeing that board for the first time, that you can step on it and it falls, made me think, like, yes, micro traps would be something to do. Like,
See, that sounds brilliant to me. And like what you were saying with the arrow, like that is excellent because then it's like, yeah, the player could turn around, he has a shield and ping, catches the arrow and the shield. I think that's excellent. I would love to see that. But I think what the problem is basically there would need to be some solution where the traps could be randomly generated, like procedurally generated, because so the way we do the dungeon tiles at the moment is like we do. I always call them rooms, even if they're outdoor. I still call it a room because they're each like little chunks, and then the chunks kind of like link together, and so in that sense, they're handmade, and the only thing that's changing about them is whether or not they are spawned, whereabouts they're spawned, like at the beginning, middle, or end of the dungeon, and then the clutter inside the room is randomly generated. So like the shelf items always different, that kind of stuff. But if we were doing traps, essentially the traps would be kind of built with the room. You know what I mean? So let's say if it was the church, and let's say you put a trap on the door in the church. Well, now that trap is always going to be there on that door of the church every single time. And that's the part that I think the game design team are worried it's going to get boring. You will know there's always a trap on the church door. So they would need to figure out some kind of way where the trap could be randomly generated, a bit like how the clutter is randomly generated. And I think that's where the technical difficulty comes into it. Because, how do you code in that? Like, I just don't know. I'm just not technical enough to know how that could work, You'd have to figure that out.
Something that just kind of came to mind is, as you proceed through the dungeon, it loads 2 tile sets. So it loads the one you're in plus the next one, right? When I'm in one of the rooms.
Yeah.
So that being said, that makes the enemies are spawning. NPCs are spawning through the other 2 tile sets when I'm in one of them. So could a trap then spawn? And so if you made them not like an instance space, so like if you made them like, okay, so this trap spawns in and it's a projectile, right? I'm just going to use the example of the arrow. So you can say, okay, so this is an emitter because you're using Unity, right? So this is an emitter. So when they go into this one, this emitter can spawn in any of these 10 locations in the tile set. They can almost make 10 small spots for these micro traps. So when they go in there, it could be in any one of these 10 spots. But I think that is the flavor you need, because when I think about I'm fighting an NPC even now, I know that the NPC only has X amount of attacks, but it suspends my disbelief to not know what they're going to do next, even though I do know what they will do next. Is if I go into a room and say, yeah, I know there could be a trap right here, and I'm looking in that direction, and then the arrow shoots me in the back of the head because it's in another spot, I think that could be the solution. But like you said, we have people way smarter than us that can say this can or cannot happen, and that's what you got to go with.
Like what the way you're describing it, I agree. That would be the best way, and so we would just need someone to tell us basically, is it feasible, or maybe we're overlooking some complexity, some technical complexity, because I would assume, let's say like you're saying, there could be 10 possible locations where a trap could appear in a room. So we would just need someone to figure out, 10 places it could appear, that it wouldn't, mess up the room. Like it would look right, it would look correct, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm for it. If it can be done, I think it'd be brilliant. I think it would add a lot.
I think so. Also,
if it could retain that kind of random procedural element, if it could be cleverly done, I think it'd be brilliant. I would love to see all stuff. Rocks falling from the ceiling, like that'd be cool.
Rocks falling from the ceiling, even while the player's climbing and they grab onto a rock. Now this is going to add a lot of stuff, I know, but if they can grab something, it's like, oh no, this one can break. Like this rock does not stay in wall.
Yeah. I think it'd be brilliant. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll return and I'll pitch this again.
Yes.
For a second. For a second consideration, because
and just be like micro traps. We don't need a giant boulder. Although this would be awesome. Like you go into a room, giant boulder runs down the staircase, and you can run and out climb it. that might be too much, but if you say micro traps, they're like,
Yeah,
okay, all right. Whatever
Yeah.
months down the line, I'm watching and I hear the sound and I just see you in first person turn around and grab that arrow that got shot from the wall. I'll do a backflip in my room. I'll be like, oh man.
That would be awesome.
To close out the dungeon stuff, I know we could probably talk about hours of dungeon stuff just because it's the dungeon, but the big thing that you're showcasing that you want everyone to know, it looks like these doors are going to play a huge factor in U11. It looks like there's full physics on it. I can close the enemy in the door. The one, this is a big question, is you make it a point to look through the peephole. Is that peephole, is that proper collision? Can I stick like a little needle through there? What happens with that, or no? Is that just?
Oh, that is a great question. That is, see, when you do like simulation games, people always think of things you don't think of. You know? So that is a great question. I'll have to test that and see if something will go right through.
Cool.
The idea was that maybe we could add keys.
Yes, that'd be cool.
But so in that case, you would definitely be able to put a key in there. But for now, there's no keys. But you can. Do you see the little like kind of latch above the handle that actually has physics and stuff?
Oh, that's a nice touch.
And there was even another little touch. I don't think it's in that preview, but there's another little touch which is that when you pull down a handle of a door, the little kind of what would you even call it? The little like stopper thing that's on the inside of the door like retracts in.
Yes.
You know, so it's pretty detailed for just like
impressive.
a door. Yeah.
Someone had a really big question also is, so obviously you can open and close the door. Can someone put a heavy object and block the door from being open or closed?
Definitely, yeah. And I had a cool gift that I couldn't share, which was the door was locked. And you could kick it in, but there was another cool one, which was picking up a boulder and then launching the boulder to smash the door open.
Oh, wow.
But, I couldn't share that one. And also, by the way, I'm not too sure about the keyhole, but you could put a knife through the handle of the door and like wedge it closed by doing that.
A huge one. We kind of buried the lead here on purpose. Other than performance, is the animation overhaul. This is a long time kind of coming. I think you guys know that, and the player base is super excited for this one. To compartmentalize this one, no need to go over each one. We can read this, but the things that I'm excited for is the AI alertness. But can you speak a little bit about, I know, like you said, I can see the red above their head and it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
But I could see you mentioned things like the AI will essentially know what weapon they're using. So they're not going to be doing a wild jab with an axe. And they're going to know that they have a rapier. So what does that look like? What does that feel like right now?
So what it feels like at the moment is very early work in progress. That's how it feels right now, because it literally has just started about in the last maybe month, if even months, I would say. So we're very much in the early stages. That's why it looks a little bit jank, and you can see the sword going through the woman's head and just all sorts of stuff like that. But here's what I would say: the animation overhaul would be 2 parts. The first part being what was planned, and the second part being a kind of stretch goal to be seen if it can be done, if we had the manpower to do it. And what the first part will be just essentially trying to make the AI more responsive, so it would be less like dodging away, and the enemy could like parry you more. That's the goal. And then the other part of that would be, taking out some of the more silly kind of animations we have, and having something that looks a little bit more like realistic. So having like the enemy, block and riposte, and so he like blocks then strikes you back, that kind of stuff. So it'll feel more like a fluid sword fight. That's the kind of goal. And then some of the silly things like trusting the axe and stuff, kind of iron that out. That would be part 1, and that's what we're aiming for. For part 2, and this is the part I say may or may not happen, we were all in agreement it would be amazing if we could set up a system that the enemy would know what kind of weapon he has, and then as a result draws from a pool of animations that are specific to that weapon. So a fencer, so a fencer, you would see like less slashes and more thrusts, and the thrust animations would be like fencer thrusts. that would be excellent. A sword and shield guy, maybe his animations would be more like, shield up kind of thing. Maybe a guy with a two-handed weapon, his animations would be big sweeping, broad swipes, that kind of stuff. Less thrusts, that kind of stuff. But why it's kind of like tricky and I'm not positive if we can do it is because that's a huge amount of work, just literally. Because it would be kind of like taking all the animations we have already and then doing them again, but for all the weapons we have in the game. So that's like a ton of animation work.
Yeah, that's true.
And if we could at least get part 1 done, I would be delighted, or a more responsive AI. That would be awesome.
And within part 1 with the more responsive AI, would that, I think you kind of mentioned it, but would that come with enemies having two-handed weapons? Like, will they use a spear? Will they use the maul?
Not for U11, but if that is on the to-do list about the idea of enemies using spears and stuff, we would just need to, for two-handed weapons and spears and stuff, we would just need to make animations. That's the delay there. It's just, we just have to make them.
Now, within this animation overhaul, there's one thing that I don't want to let you get away with not saying. So when we look at other mods that kind of come to the game, one of the biggest things that people add in is half sorting to a lot of these weapons. And things like your guys' longsword and claymores specifically, these other weapons don't have half sorting. Can players expect half sorting for vanilla weapons soon?
Yeah, you can kind of half sword.
You can kind of half sword, but you get the claw hand grip. I mean, full half sword.
Exactly, with the claw hand grip. I think the reason it was removed is because it can introduce derpiness with your wrist and stuff. And for modders, a mod is as is. So a modder doesn't care. It's like, oh, it's derpy? Well, who cares? It's a free mod. So that's just kind of like the kind of consideration that we would have. But it was mentioned recently in the Warfrog chat. We were saying, what about the idea that we could have half sorting enabled just for the longer weapons, so like the claymore and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, that would be cool. I would be in favor of it.
Now, the next big part, and this is really in closing now, I don't want to keep you forever. Of course, performance is always the big component, and I think it's very satisfying to know that although you guys are making these huge leaps and these updates, that performance is always at the forefront, especially for PC VR, because that one could really push fidelity to the extreme. And we've all played VR games that look good but feel bad. Blade and Sorcery has always been a game that looks decent and feels great. So I'm excited to know that you guys have that in mind. So as you update things like, adding more collision, responsiveness, new effects and everything, that it's still well optimized. Now, that being said, how much of that is a challenge with optimizing for performance that's stopping you from adding something that you want to add in?
I don't think anything, actually.
That's good. That's good to hear.
Yeah, because I think it's always the case that we just power ahead. I mean, I guess if you want to get literal about it, then you could say well, of course, I would love hundreds of enemies on screen, and but we have to be realistic. That's just not going to happen. So I guess in that sense, the performance overhead does kind of cap the ambition of the game when it comes to how many enemies can you put on screen and stuff. But there's always kind of ways around it. So even with U10, we found a way to make dungeons work.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard to say.
So this is essentially the end. I have a couple things to go over. One of the biggest one that's a standout. I probably should have said it in the beginning, but we have a ton now of Nomad players that have joined us, and they're more than welcome to have a seat at the table. Everything we just spoke about. I know this has been a long list, but we can expect for U11 will also come to Nomad if everything goes with PC's launch of U11. If that goes pretty unhitched, everything will come to Nomad, right? In a relative amount of time.
Yep. I as far as I know, there'll be nothing that won't come except for in that news, there's some sections that are very specifically talking about PC, like the VFX and the graphics and stuff. So obviously that would be Oculus Quest, that would not translate to Oculus Quest. But the other stuff like, the inventory system, the apparel system, the changes between the magic, the stealth, all that kind of stuff, features, would pass over to Nomad. And for anyone wondering when that would be, it would generally be, like you say, the PC release would happen. Make sure that there's nothing crippling about the PC release, because in other words, if there's something crippling in the PC release, why would we release the same crippling thing for Nomad? So that thing would be fixed for PC, and then when PC is working good, then it would be ported over to Nomad. Okay. So I would say it would be probably, a couple of weeks after PC VR release. That's probably when you could expect.
That's a pretty good timeline.
Yeah.
Now, if I don't ask this next point, I will probably be stoned in the street. So obviously U11 is the main focus, and then the road ahead. Now specifically for Nomad, I don't know if you've answered it, and excuse me if you've answered this before. Scripting mods for Nomad, especially in its U10 state, how feasible is that, and maybe how soon can someone expect a modder to be able to say, yes, I can now make scripts for Nomad?
Yeah, I get this question asked. This is the most common question I get asked now, because I know people are super excited for scripting mods. Here is the answer officially. There's someone working on this full time, okay? And when it will be done is just a case of when that will be done. Like, there's no progression bar for it. Like, he can't look at it and he can't say, if I just type, 1,000 more lines of code, I'm done. He just doesn't really know, because he's like figuring it out. And I did ask him there last week, how's it going? Like, how's it looking? Does it look like bad news? Does it look like good news? And he was feeling optimistic, but he says it's extremely dense coding. And he says it's just a slow process. So I can't really say when it'll be done. But all I can say is that there's someone working on this. He's working on it all the time. It's just slow work, and he's definitely trying his best. So we're really hoping to get that work. If we can get that work, it would be an insane achievement, not just for Blade and Sorcery, but for the Quest. To get scripted mods working on that would be bananas. So yeah, we're really, really, really hoping on that. So we'll see. But I think it's just going to be one of those cases where it's like, hey guys, surprise!
Boom! Here's your script.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see.
Cool. So I guess the other thing, and this is, I made sure that this is the last one because it doesn't. I don't know if it needs an answer, yes, but it's low priority or on list. Is that, of course, with the changes from any generation to the next one for your guys' game, mods stop working and they start working. So with U11, do you expect everything to change, and will all modders have to say this is our U11 version?
I would expect that, and I would say to everybody that you should expect that, because historically that's always been the case. And it just depends. Like, there's been some updates where I don't think there's been any updates where things didn't break, but there's been some updates where major updates where what the modders had to do to make their mods work is really simple, and it's just like a quick one line or two of code that makes things work. And then there's been some of the older updates where it's like, oh, what a huge pain, because things are really broken and we got to do a bunch of work.
Yeah, from like U7 to U8, I know it's a big...
Exactly, yeah, that's a great example, yeah. So I think for this one, it won't be one of those horrible, huge updates, but I'm nearly sure modders would have to update all their mods, which they, are pretty swift about usually. And for things like weapons, they tend to not be too bad. The worst mods to update are the massive ones. So Outer Rim being probably the worst.
How long is that going to be out of commission then when it goes to you?
Yeah, exactly. I always feel bad for him because by the time he usually has it updated, we're almost ready for the next update. But Outer Rim is the exception. That's you're talking that's an expansion pack. He's got so much going on that. So most mods would not be like Outer Rim. And then the medieval mega pack. Mm-hmm. The issue there is he just has the hundreds of weapons. So even if it's a simple change, he has to do it 100 times. So that's kind of like the issue with that. But other things, like use simple weapons and simple mods like that, simple JSON tweaks, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect it to be too bad.
So I have one final question for you, and then that's it. When can I voice some bad guy dialogue for you guys? I want to make some horrific NPCs. I want to have an NPC talking to each other during, well, stealth. They don't know I'm there. They're having a conversation like, hey, what do you want to do for lunch? And then, you know, they get stabbed. So when's that happening?
Well, I'll tell you, it's weird you actually are saying this, because literally this morning I was looking at this. I was looking at my to-do list, and one of the like lower priorities things I had to do was I was thinking about this idea where I would do a crowdsource of player voices.
Yes.
Okay. And just gather as much data as I could, just hundreds and hundreds of lines of dialogue from just players. Anyone who's interested, like yourself, anyone who's just interested in doing it. And then, you know, kind of say to people, look, no guarantee that I would use it, because first of all, I don't know if people do this, and then second of all, maybe people's voices wouldn't be suited if they had like strong accents or that kind of stuff. After sourcing like hundreds of lines and then taking like the best quality ones, maybe just put them in the game as like random lines of dialogue. But there's all sorts of question marks. When I brought this up, you know, when Warfrog, we chatted about this, and like there's all sorts of question marks, like how can we do it so that the lines of dialogue make sense? So for example, if two NPCs are chatting and one says, I saw a mud crab the other day, the other guy has to have some kind of response that is either generic enough that it fits, or else he's some way to understand what the other character's saying, and then he has a response that makes sense.
Yeah, man.
So
makes sense.
So,
I saw a mud crab the other day. The guy could just be just like, just get back to work. You know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just pay attention. Pay attention. That's it.
Exactly. So it's on my to-do list that I needed to come up with dozens and dozens of these generic-y kind of lines that the players could then go and record.
So what I'm hearing you just said is full MMO co-op, and that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Baron, thank you so much. I mean, we covered a ton of stuff in here, and I hope that answers everyone's questions. I know that there's going to be questions that have been unasked, and that was done on purpose. We want to make sure that things aren't spoiled. We want to make sure that things aren't over-promised and under-delivered, which would be terrible. But I want to say to everyone, thank you so much for stopping by. Baron, thank you for fielding these questions. I know you guys have a busy schedule, so it's always awesome when we can get a member of the team, and albeit a community manager, to kind of answer these questions for us. So we want to say a very special thank you to you. Do you have anything that you want to tell us? Any last minute, like, you know, free Blade and Sorcery check under your seats for anyone?
None really, other than just for the topics that I didn't have solid confirmations on, like, you know, the inventory system and so that. It's just because it's cutting edge. Like, they're literally are working on it right now, and there's still question marks there. So sorry I don't have all the answers for every single thing, but as I get the news, you will get the news.
That's awesome. Well, Grebos, that is it for today's video. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Rob from Downloadable Content. That has been Baron, and I will see you in the next video.